$350,000 for just a few hours in the sky. Not to own a jet, not to build an empire, but to escape one. In a city that once sold the world a vision of untouchable luxury, that number has quietly transformed into something else entirely. The price of urgency, the cost of uncertainty, the value of leaving before everyone else does. Right now, at the edges of Dubai's glittering skyline, a different kind of market is unfolding. One where billionaires are no longer competing for penthouses or supercars, but for seats, for routes, for time. And the question that echoes through every terminal, every empty suite, every silent boulevard is simple. What changed? Before we go deeper into this unfolding reality, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear isn't just another headline-driven story. It's a deeper look into the shifting foundations behind one of the most ambitious cities ever built. And why the people who once trusted it the most are now quietly stepping away. Because when you look closer, that $350,000 flight is not just a number, it's a signal. At Al Maktoum Airport, what used to be a symbol of global connectivity has started to feel like an exit gate under pressure. Private terminals are no longer about comfort. They've become negotiation moves. Deals are being made in minutes. Decisions compressed into seconds. People who once had unlimited access are now facing limitations. Not of money, but of timing. And that's the real shift. When availability becomes scarce, even wealth starts to feel constrained. The irony is impossible to ignore. Just months earlier, Dubai stood at the peak of its global image, celebrating record-breaking travel numbers and positioning itself as the center of movement between continents. But systems built on constant motion carry an unspoken risk. When that motion slows, everything connected to it begins to feel the strain. Flights get disrupted, routes get complicated, and suddenly the same infrastructure that symbolized freedom begins to feel like a bottleneck. And yet, if you walk through the terminals, you'll still see crowds. Screens still glow, announcements still echo, and planes still line the runways. But something is different. The energy has shifted. The intent has changed. This is no longer just a flow of arrivals. It's a pattern of departures. Not loud, not chaotic, but steady and deliberate. The kind of movement that doesn't make headlines immediately, but leaves a lasting impact over time. Outside in the long-term parking areas, the contrast becomes even sharper. Rows of high-end cars sit untouched, slowly collecting dust under the desert sun. These machines, once symbols of status and presence, now feel like placeholders. Objects left behind not because they lost value, but because something else became more important. In moments of uncertainty, priorities rearrange themselves quickly. What once felt essential becomes optional. What once symbolized success becomes secondary. And that shift isn't just physical, it's psychological. For decades, Dubai didn't just build structures. It built a perception, a sense of stability, of insulation from global disruptions, of being slightly removed from the volatility affecting other regions. That perception became part of its identity, attracting capital, talent, and attention from across the world. But perception, no matter how strong, is still intangible. And when it starts to waver, the effects ripple far beyond headlines. One of the key turning points came quietly without the kind of noise people expected. Late February 2026 introduced a moment that disrupted more than just schedules. It challenged assumptions, not through direct impact alone, but through what it represented. For a city built on predictability and control, even a brief disruption can carry outsized consequences. Because once the idea of absolute certainty is questioned, even slightly, confidence begins to recalibrate. And confidence is everything in a place like this. When confidence holds, investment flows effortlessly, tourism thrives, and growth feels almost automatic. But when confidence hesitates even briefly, the entire system begins to slow. Bookings get delayed. Decisions get reconsidered. Expansion plans get paused. Not out of panic, but out of caution. And caution, when multiplied across millions of decisions, creates a visible shift. You start to see it in places that once felt permanently alive. Luxury hotels that were always booked weeks in advance now carry a quieter atmosphere. Restaurants that thrived on constant turnover experience longer pauses between guests. High-end retail spaces still shine, but foot traffic begins to thin in subtle ways. Nothing collapses overnight, but the rhythm changes. At the same time, the economic structure beneath the surface starts to reveal its complexity. Dubai's growth has always been driven by movement. The movement of people, of capital, of ideas. It thrives when the world is active, when borders are fluid, when confidence is high. But that also means it is highly responsive to shifts in global sentiment. When external conditions tighten, internal systems feel the pressure faster than expected. And this is where the $350,000 flight becomes symbolic again. It represents not just escape, but flexibility. The ability to move quickly when conditions change. But here's the paradox. Even that flexibility has limits. Because leaving one system often means entering another. Different regulations, different financial frameworks, different expectations. The idea of complete freedom becomes more complicated the closer you examine it. For many high-net-worth individuals, decisions are no longer just about geography. They're about structure. Where to stay, how long to stay, what that means legally, financially, strategically. A simple movement across borders can trigger layers of consequences that go far beyond travel. And suddenly, what seemed like a quick exit becomes a carefully calculated transition. Meanwhile, the broader economy continues to adjust in ways that are subtle on the surface, but deeply connected underneath. Aviation, tourism, and real estate. The three pillars that have powered Dubai's rapid ascent do not operate in isolation. They move together almost like gears in a tightly wound machine. When one begins to slow, even slightly, the others inevitably feel the resistance. A dip in arrivals doesn't just affect airport traffic. It quietly reduces hotel occupancy, which then impacts staffing, services, and the entire hospitality chain. That slowdown extends further into retail, dining, and entertainment, and eventually circles back to real estate, where demand begins to soften. Not dramatically, but steadily. This is not a sudden collapse or a visible breakdown. It's a gradual chain reaction, one that unfolds quietly but carries long-term consequences. And yet, Dubai has faced moments of pressure before and managed to push forward. The city has built its identity on resilience, speed, and the ability to adapt faster than most. But what makes this phase different is not simply the presence of difficulty. It's the nature of the challenge itself. This is no longer just about building more, expanding further, or setting new records. It's about perception. About confidence. About how the world sees Dubai and how investors, residents, and visitors feel about its long-term stability. These are intangible forces, but in a city like this, they're just as powerful as steel and concrete. Because at its core, Dubai remains one of the most ambitious economic and urban experiments ever attempted. A city that transformed itself in record time, redefining what modern development can look like when vision meets capital and execution. But every experiment eventually reaches a stage where it must evolve. A point where momentum alone is no longer enough to sustain growth and where the focus begins to shift toward durability, balance, and long-term trust. The real question now is not how fast Dubai can grow, but how well it can adapt to a world that is becoming less predictable, more cautious, and increasingly selective about where it places its confidence. If this deeper perspective helped you understand what's really happening beneath the surface, make sure to like this video, share it with others who are trying to make sense of these global shifts, and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth breakdowns like this. Because the story is still unfolding, and the next chapter may be even more revealing. The question now isn't whether Dubai will survive. It will. The question is how it will transform. Will it double down on its existing model, pushing forward with even bigger projects and bolder visions? Or will it recalibrate, focusing on resilience, sustainability, and deeper structural balance? Because the next phase of its journey will likely depend on that choice. And for those watching from the outside, the lesson goes beyond one city. It's about understanding how modern economies function, how they grow, how they attract, and how they respond when conditions shift. It's about recognizing that behind every skyline is a system, and behind every system is a set of assumptions. When those assumptions are tested, the response defines the future. So, when you hear about $350,000 flights, don't just think about luxury. Think about what it represents. Think about the decisions being made in real time, the priorities being reshaped, and the signals being sent quietly across global markets. Because sometimes the most important changes don't happen with noise. They happen in transitions. If this breakdown gave you a clearer perspective on what's really happening behind the headlines, make sure to like this video, share it with others who are watching these global shifts unfold, and subscribe to the channel for more deep analyses like this. Because the story of Dubai and the forces shaping it is far from over.